Alain de Botton.
What do organized religions do? They group together, they form institutions. And that has all sorts of advantages. First of all, scale, might. The Catholic Church pulled in $97 billion last year, according to the Wall Street Journal. Now, religions have a much saner attitude to art. They have no trouble telling us what art is about. Essentially, it's propaganda. Rembrandt is a propagandist in the Christian view. Now, the word propaganda sets off alarm bells. We think of Hitler, we think of Stalin. Don't necessarily. Propaganda is a manner of being didactic in honor of something. Art should be one of the tools by which we improve our society. Art should be didactic. If I was a museum curator, I would make a room for love, a room for generosity. Books alone, books written by lone individuals, are not going to change anything.
I received a request from a longtime viewer that I respond to the political philosophy of Alain de Botton. You've just heard an uninterrupted but highly edited and compressed form of his philosophy on this topic. And I just note, I feel as if I'm sort of kicking someone when they're down, because this is not really his area of expertise. This is definitely not his area of greatest strength. Thanks to Wikipedia, I now know that he first became famous and respected as an author actually for his thoughts about romance, dating, relations between the sexes, falling in and out of love. I have no reason to question his credentials under that heading. But it's remarkable the extent to which I disagree with him and the extent to which I really have complete contempt for his expressed views in this lecture, that I think I have compressed down to 2 minutes here fairly effectively. Given the vague resemblance it has, at least, to my own thoughts in a video many of you will have seen that's just titled On Community. I have often argued on this channel that there's an important role for community building and institution building. I'm normally saying it in reference to veganism as a political movement, but it could apply just as easily to the struggle we have as atheists or as nihilists in trying to raise our children with meaningful values and meaningful rituals, a meaningful life in what sometimes seems like an intensely meaningless and largely commercialized world. So Alain speaks very, very rapidly in that clip. As you saw, it's not sped up. That's the pace at which he gave the lecture originally. So let's now go through it step by step.
Now, religions have a much saner attitude to art. They have no trouble telling us what art is about. Essentially, it's propaganda. Rembrandt is a propagandist in the Christian view. Now, the word propaganda sets off alarm bells. We think of Hitler, we think of Stalin. Don't necessarily. Propaganda is a manner of being didactic in honor of something. Art should be one of the tools by which we improve our society. Art should be didactic.
So you guys may have noticed at the start of that clip that I point out to you that he's reached an audience of 750,000 viewers just with that one version of the video on one YouTube channel. I don't know how many other broadcast media are used for this. However, you might also notice that it's just coming up now to its 7-year anniversary. And I think it is worth asking with any kind of political manifesto of this kind, to what extent in 7 years have any of these ideas been put into practice? To what extent have they found currency? To what extent have they proven to be applicable or effective? And would I be going too far if I said not at all? That these have been, in a 7-year retrospect, this program of action he's laying out is a complete failure, including even the position he takes here on art as propaganda. And this might be the easiest to implement part of his vision. Major Hollywood movies now, and yeah, I did look this up before making the video, major Hollywood movies cost about $250 million to make. It's easy to say, as he does in his rousing conclusion here, art should be didactic. Well, there's a real hierarchy of power involved in who would make the decision about what is going to be taught, what lessons are going to be set down, who is, so to speak, going to write the script, and then who is going to furnish the $250 million to deliver that message. We see year after year now artistic projects that may start off with various pretensions of making the world a better place, but in the end are scrambling, trying to just not drive their own studio to bankruptcy. It is a very, very difficult struggle to make a movie about a man in skin-tight clothing who's been bitten by a radioactive spider earn the $500 million or more that it needs just to break even. So it's interesting to me that this argument, as simple as it may seem, can simply be refuted by pointing to the economic reality of what propaganda is, what propaganda always must be, and why there is a profound difference between propaganda and art. If the government of China, which is still to this day a communist country, paid $250 million to make a film carrying its didactic message, as he says, do you think that film would earn back the $250 million in profits from audiences here in Canada, the United States, Western Europe, from audiences paying to see it? This is, sadly or strangely, not a hypothetical question. One of the last really large-scale, large-budget attempts at propaganda filmmaking from China was a major film about Lei Feng. I'll tell you a little bit who that is. The young Lei Feng, the early life of Lei Feng, a national communist hero whose whole life, by the way, is fiction. He originated as a propaganda figure. He's a propaganda figure still. And despite the government putting in a huge budget, of course, this is all done on a nonprofit basis, it was such a flop, it was so unsuccessful, that in some cinemas, nobody bought even a single ticket. And local governments respond to this challenge in different ways. Apparently, in some counties or some areas, the government, in order to cover up its sense of embarrassment, canceled the screenings entirely, took the film out of cinemas, so they wouldn't have the embarrassment of looking at empty seats. And in other counties, reportedly, they tried to round people up and force them to go and watch the film. So, yeah, there are some basic ideas here about what is art, what is propaganda, the economic and political basis for why propaganda is so profoundly different from art, that Alain de Botton seems to have gotten to his middle-aged years without ever seriously questioning or thinking about. And to say this is a one-sided or rose-colored glasses view of propaganda is an understatement. I did laugh out loud just now, listening back to the tape, at the moment when he says, well, the word propaganda might remind you of the Nazis or Joseph Stalin. He says, don't think about that.
The word propaganda sets off alarm bells. We think of Hitler, we think of Stalin. Don't.
Propaganda is something paid for. Period. That's absolutely part of the definition. And it is true that it is not always governments who pay for propaganda. It is true that we can all donate money to a cause like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And independent charities, especially when they have a clear, singular purpose, may take on propagandistic art projects, filmmaking, or what have you. But point two is that propaganda is normally something the audience will see unwillingly or involuntarily, even if that's as simple as Mothers Against Drunk Driving paying to put up a video playing in a public place as an advertisement, or a poster. I remember they used to be all the time in the buses. When you were riding the bus, there'd be posters, advertisements in the bus. That's paid for, and you didn't choose to see it. I do not remember Mothers Against Drunk Driving ever putting together $250 million to make a mainstream Hollywood movie and then trying to earn a profit on, dramatizing the misery of people dying in drunk driving accidents. Now, I want to move past very quickly here the abstract general question of who would pay for this. So who would pay for this new school of art and propaganda he's talking about? I want to ask you directly, you the viewer, or you, Alain de Botton, if you see this, would you pay the money for this? This comes back to one of the great fundamental differences between faith and faithlessness. It's very easy to get people to contribute money to a presumed good cause on the basis of faith. And people become remarkably skeptical about donating their money when they're making decisions on the basis of something other than faith. When people actually believe that they're donating money to save their soul, to buy their way into the eternal kingdom of heaven or to defeat some great and supernatural evil. It's remarkable how uncritical they are about donating money and not really caring about where it goes and what happens to it. By contrast, we really do have major campaigns in veganism as an ethical cause, as an ethological cause, even as a health-based cause. We do have propaganda campaigns that are based on people donating their money to create those works of propaganda and then to somehow advertise them or expose them to an audience or what have you. And to say people are skeptical about donating their money is an understatement. I think one of the questions people ask whenever they drive past a giant billboard telling you not to drink cow milk because think about the suffering of the cows, people driving their cars say, who would pay for that? Who indeed? Would you? And all the time I talk to my friends, I have friends and colleagues in the vegan movement, and they tell me that they are donating money to somebody like Joey Carbstrong or someone like Earthling Ed or Direct Action Everywhere led by Wayne Seong. I have varying degrees of misgiving about the other leaders who are out there in veganism. But the level of skepticism, the level of scrutiny, we don't believe in these people. In a very real sense, when you're talking about it on a level of faith, we don't believe in this cause. So the questions about donating money to support propaganda or to support art with this conception of a didactic, propagandistic role for art in our society, the very simple question of who would pay for it and would you? And then what are you going to do if nobody shows up in the cinema? What are you going to do if the movie bombs? Are you going to have the soldiers? Are you going to have the army force people to watch the movie at gunpoint? Are you going to force it down people's throat by making it the only thing on TV like North Korea? I'm sorry, these are maybe dark and extreme questions. But at the opposite extreme, would you be happy raising $250 million and nobody sees the film? Your money just goes down the drain. It's a flop. And how many times is that going to go on? How could that ever possibly have the durability and influence that he's looking for? He wants atheist institutions to resemble the Catholic Church. Well, I'm sorry, in the absence of faith, it could never possibly be that durable. Because what you're describing here, implicitly, is madness.